Good morning. Happy Thanksgiving. You're going to be watching this after Thanksgiving, so hopefully you had a wonderful one. I'm so sorry I'm late getting the pumpkin pie video out, but maybe you'll still want to make one for Christmas. First, I have to, though, start with a pie crust. And it's Thanksgiving morning, so I'm making a quiche for breakfast. But this recipe is a 2 pie crust recipe, so one's going to be used for the quiche and the other one's for the pumpkin pie. Okay, so I'll make sure to put the ingredients in the description below. But for this pie crust, you just need flour, butter, some salt, and some water. Speaking of that, I need my salt. So you're going to start with 2.5 cups of flour. Mix in a teaspoon of salt. Mix that together. This is a really heavy butter recipe pie crust, which we like. It's really flaky. Then you're going to want to add into that your 1 cup of cold butter. And you can process this in the food processor. I just never do. I just cut my butter into cubes and cut it in with my hands. You want your butter to be ice cold. You don't want room temperature butter sticks. This just got pulled right out of the fridge. Now the fun part. Okay, what you're going to want to do is you can use a pastry cutter, you can use a fork. I prefer my hands. You're just going to work this butter into your flour and salt mixture until it looks like basically cornmeal. Okay, I think we've got it just about right at the right texture that we're looking for. And now we're going to add our ice water. And you're going to add this 1 to 2 tablespoons at a time, which I don't necessarily do. I just pour it in and mix it. And until you kind of get like a dry, crumbly dough ball. You don't want it over wet, that's for sure. So the recipe calls for 1 to 2 cups of water. I definitely never use anywhere near 2 cups. Now when it starts getting close, I'm going to start working it with my hands and seeing if it's going to hold together for me. Yeah, we're pretty close right there. So if I would have kept going while it looked like that, guys, it would have been way too wet. So just work it with your hands till you can get it into a good dough ball, and then split it in half for your 2 pie crust. Good. Okay, so I just split it in half, and I'm going to stick, this one is going to be for the pumpkin pie. I'm going to wrap this, put it in the fridge for, you want to put it in there for about 30 minutes. The quiche one, I'm just going to go ahead and roll out, and we're going to get going on our breakfast. Quiche is in the oven. I just pulled this pie crust out of the fridge, and my cheat is I never ever use flour when rolling anything out. I don't care if it's my biscuits, if it's sugar cookies, pie crust. I hate over-floured pastries. So I'm just using 2 pieces of waxed parchment paper, and I will work on rolling this out. What you're aiming for is like a 13-inch pie crust to leave yourself room to do your pretty edges with. If you make a ball first and then just work in circles, you can typically get a pretty round pie crust. Okay, so peel it back slowly. Ta-da! And then you can fold it and fold it again to put in there, but I just set the pie plate on top and then flip it. Kind of making sure it's even-ish. And then just slowly work back your paper. Okay, and adjust as needed. Now, I do not do fancy edges. I used to, but I found an easier way that gives you a nice clean pie crust edge, and that's what I do now. So all I do for my pie crust is I just roll down roll down the edges. So there you have it. Easy peasy pie crust, no mess. So now we're gonna get into the meat of it, and that is our pumpkin pie. So I'm very, very fortunate that we have a long legacy of wonderful recipes passed down. My baby sister got the family cookbook when my mother passed away. This is my great grandmother's pumpkin pie recipe. One time I think I mentioned that I lost it in my past recipe. So I called her up, got it back. But when I lost it, I searched high and low for this recipe on the internet. I could not find a single recipe that had the same ingredients. So I'm going to share it with you. It is not your typical store-bought dense pumpkin pie, your Libby's pumpkin pie recipe. It's a nice, fluffy, just heavenly pumpkin pie. So let's get into it. Okay, so the recipe calls for 1 can of pumpkin. I am, as my last recipe showed, using our homegrown pumpkin. And I bagged this in about 2 cups. And I think a can of pumpkin is like 1 3/4 cups, just under 2 cups. So we're just gonna take the majority of this. 1/2 cup of butter. So to help with the blending process, I'm going to just cut it up in little chunks. And I remember when I first made this recipe, so what you're gonna see when you blend this is kind of like chunky pieces of butter in it, and I think that might be part of the secret, guys. So I mentioned this was my great grandmother's. We called her Granny Wyatt. She was my mother's grandmother. Lived her whole life in Texas. You want 3 eggs. These are our farm fresh eggs. 1 1/2 teaspoons of vanilla. I never measure vanilla. 2 cups of sugar. I would suppose that if you don't want to use sugar, you could replace this with maple syrup. Then I already mentioned the butter. 1/2 cup of 1/2 and 1/2. And for the cloves, you want 1/4 teaspoon. Cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon. I think one of the other secrets is this recipe calls for 3 eggs. I've never seen another pumpkin pie recipe call for 3 eggs, and 1/4 cup of ginger. And then lastly, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And then you're going to mix this all up until it's incorporated. Okay, all mixed up. Kitchen is cleaned up. Quiche is out of the oven. So we are going to, if I don't spill this, pour this in. I already got the oven preheated to 350, and you're going to bake it for 70 minutes. Can you guys see this? See the little butter dots like I mentioned? That's what's going to be the heaven part. Okay, pumpkin pie's all ready. You can really see that butter bubbling out of it. Anyway, again, I'm sorry it's late. I know I promised to get it out before Thanksgiving. If you know a really cool pumpkin pie recipe, sweet potato recipe, something that's unique, please share it in the comments below. Tell me what you think, and thanks a lot, guys. Bye.